And can I just ask something that I noticed, and I want you to explain in case I have it wrong? I know that the children received the Utrecht Gender Dysphoria scale at the beginning of the treatment.
Yeah,
And this seems to be a biologically sex differentiated scale. So girls get the girls scale and boys get the boys scale. And so in 2011, all the children presumably got, whether they were girls or boys at the beginning of treatment, they got that scale. And for example, a girl would get very high gender dysphoria assessment from the Utrecht Gender Dysphoria scale. And then she received treatment and she got puberty blockers, this hypothetical girl, and she got cross-sex hormones. And then I noticed in a footnote in the 2014 study, the follow-up, that these children who had undergone treatment then would receive, this hypothetical girl would then receive the boy gender dysphoria scale. And so would inevitably, I would argue, score actually quite low on gender dysphoria because it was questions such as, are you happy being a boy? Do you like people perceiving you as a boy? Do your, masculine presentation distress you?
yeah.
Do you think that feels like, why didn't you keep the one scale? It feels like it just totally messed with the results.
The skill wouldn't work anymore after treatment, but because at that point of time, so we did it in 2011 because blockers are, we have always seen them as not really affirming treatment yet. It's just pausing development, and bodily changes are only started when partially reversible. We always said hormones are started, sex hormones, and of course surgeries. So that's why we did that skill, the boys skill, at a time then when they were identifying as male, living as male, and also had their physical characteristic as much as they wanted adapted as male. And the measure itself, I mean, there is definitely some and Thomas can maybe say more about it. There's definitely some criticism about it because it's very binary, and it's maybe not the most ideal instrument to measure gender dysphoria, but it works pretty well in a sense that if you're gender dysphoric extremely, it will show quite clearly.
It just feels for me that this hypothetical girl, she would be thrilled about presenting as a boy. So of course her gender dysphoria would be massively reduced because it would be now saying how masculine you look, and so it was completely the other end.
Yeah, but that, I mean, that's the meaning of the treatment, or not?
If there was a more general scale about how proud and how much you like your body, it seems like it would be more appropriate as a consistent question, if you follow me. It was the most shocking moment since I've got into gender.
I think this is important, and I actually have the scales pulled up so we could just help the audience understand. So first of all, as a general, like if you take a Research Methods 101 graduate school course in psychology, you will learn that when we assess an intervention and we implement a battery or we give an assessment before and after the intervention, you should use the same exact scale, or else you're talking about comparing apples and oranges. So it's like if I gave you one kind of happiness inventory before the intervention, then I did my therapy with you and gave you a totally, totally different set of questions. You can't compare them. Okay. So before the intervention, the females in the study were asked things like, are you satisfied being a woman? In the past 12 months, have you felt that it would be better to live as a man? Or things like, have you felt that you don't have in common anything with other men or women? So these are really sex-specific questions. Are you comfortable using the women's restroom? Have strangers ever treated you like a man? That's interesting because that is a question about whether or not you are perceived as a masculine person. So the kids were asked female specific questions. So it was sex specific. And then after the intervention, they switched to the sex scale for the other sex. So females were then given the male scale, which says, every time someone treats me like a boy, I feel hurt. I feel unhappy if somebody calls me a boy. I feel unhappy because I have a male body. I dislike urinating in a standing position. So help me understand that. A female on hormones is now all of a sudden standing to urinate? Like, these questions don't apply because they're not male.
And further, of course, any of the questions that was to do with I hate being a woman, they are female, they would have answered high. So they scored high on the gender dysphoria at the beginning before they had any interventions. Then they were given the switch and they were asked, do you enjoy feeling like a man? And they said, I love it. And so suddenly they were told, oh, that means your gender dysphoria has reduced.
So
it was a completely flawed system. The entire system. And don't forget, for people who haven't studied it as in-depth as us two, these two studies, these 70 children, started with 70, ended up with 55 children, two studies, 2011 and 2014. The entire concept of puberty blockers rests on these studies. That's number one. Number two is they don't show any significant statistical advantage for depression or anxiety or other kind of distress. The only thing that really came out of that study is the gender dysphoria is massively reduced. And then we realize, oh my God, the gender dysphoria scale was based on a very, very flawed system of giving first a girl scale and then a few years later, after the interventions, a boy scale. And of course, they're going to answer one way for the girl scale and a very different way for the boy scale. And that is not the way to say gender dysphoria has reduced. Because if you'd asked this little girl, who, first of all, biological girl, first of all, she would have said, I hate being a girl, I hate being perceived as a girl. If she had been given all those interventions and then been asked, do you hate being a girl and hate being perceived as a girl? She would have said, yep.
She'd say yes.
Yeah.
She'd say, of course I hate it.
Probably more, because very often all those interventions focus the mind. She would have been more sensitive, more obsessed, more intense about it. So it actually could have gone the other way. And the entire premise of this puberty blockers experiment is based on the so-called success of these gender dysphoria scales.
And I'd like to add to that, not only would gender dysphoria results look different had you used the same scale, you could have used their method of switching scales and gotten a positive result without doing any medical intervention.
Oh my God.
So let me read. Let's think about the typical dysphoric female. Think of yourself when you were a kid.
Yeah.
If someone asked you this question, every time someone treats me like a boy, I feel hurt. Nope. No. I'm thrilled about it.
I'm a king.
I feel unhappy if someone calls me a boy. Nope.
I feel thrilled.
The idea that I will always be a boy gives me a sinking feeling. No.
Yeah.
So you could have done this exact same study without touching a puberty blocker. No surgery.
It's an appalling flawed system that has given flawed results and that has set sail into the world. An entire concept that has caused devastation, an absolute devastation.